Hey y'all, I am VictorE and I help provide insight to empower. And today I wanted to do a spiritual, metaphysical, intuitive breakdown of an iconic character, the Joker. So what the Joker represents and how I'm going to break it down is the spirit, the archetype of chaos, of renewal. In Indian culture, it might be known as the Shakti energy, or I think Shiva, the destroyer god. And as a reference, I'm going to be using the Dark Knight it's still like the most true to form, like spiritual archetypical form for this universal and at least subconsciously acknowledged energy. So the Joker representing chaos brings with it two main colors that we can associate, and that's green and purple or violet. So why these colors are so important in breaking down the character is because green is usually associated with the heart chakra, so love. Violet or purple is in reference to the violet light, the violet color, and the violet flame, or the violet energy. This energy is one that I use and many healers use to do a special type of spiritual energetic cleaning called a transmutation. If you saw WandaVision with the Agatha Harkness, she like kind of briefly touches on it. She does like a witch thing. It's more or less different than how I or another type of healer who would use this tool would use it. But as you may have seen in WandaVision, it's changing one thing into another. Transmutation is just changing the state or perception of a certain thing. So with the violet flame as a healing tool and as it pertains to the Joker is one of change. And what inspired this video was, not just I'm wearing green and purple today. It was just like an intuitive thing that felt right. But it speaks to the greater, or like the bigger picture of things, right? If you think of a wildfire in the forest, the ones that are happening in California, the ones that are happening or that happened in Australia at massive scale, we may, as human beings, interpret it in one way. Usually the fire, danger, negativity. But in the higher planes or higher dimensions, it's one of the greater acts of love, right? I'm thinking of Bill Burr and one of his stand-up specials saying, let it clear out the dead wood. And he was referring he was referring to like a virus killing a bunch of people. And this was pre-corona. But that's what's going on in these wildfires and in times of intense emotional upheaval in our lives. In the spiritual community or in the healing communities, this is known as the dark night of the soul, and it's one that we go through as many times as we need to, ideally, and yes, as many times as we need to, it's going to happen. Maston Kipp, in his book Claim Your Power, referred to this as a divine storm, where it seems like everything is going to shit, everything's falling apart. But in retrospect, let's say, past the storm, it's one of those things that you look back on and are grateful for because it moved circumstances, it moved you, it moved people, either out of your way or it moved you into a better path. I did a few. I did the two that come to mind, two healings that I did, where I cleaned out a lot of karma, a lot of past lives, a lot of other dense and dark things, from the spiritual plane down, from the causal plane down is how I say it, without getting too deep into it. And within 3 days, both had pretty deep change, like a deep cleanse, systematic removal of certain things, but it was also the time for that stuff to happen. The first one lost her grandmother, and the other one was in a very intense car accident. She ended up with like a scar on her, over her eyebrow, and the guy that she was with, he ended up being, a cheater, right? So what do these things have to do? Why would that be a good thing with a healing? Well, for the person that lost their grandmother, there's this person who was ready to move on to their next mission, to their next life, to, the next steps in their spiritual evolution. And whenever you lose something, it's important to keep in mind what's going with it and where you spiritually, energetically want to hang on. And this is a pretty deep assignment for me in this life, is learning to let go, because there's still a lot of stuff that I'm learning to let go. I can be kind of hard-headed or stubborn in wanting to hold on to things that held a lot of potential in my eyes, my earthly eyes. But from a higher perspective, things were being removed for me because better things awaited. And that's something that, it's an exercise in faith, right? If the F word is a no-no word for you, like it was for me for so long, then it's definitely part of our assignment to not try to control things so vividly, so viciously, to learn to let go and trust that better things are coming. And that's the act of having faith. And so what this Joker archetype, what brings it about, are conditions that necessitate that, right? High heat, lots of dry, dead wood that's not getting a whole lot of water or moisture are breeding grounds for fires. I spent 4 years in California, in the Marines, and there were so many times where training had to stop, thankfully, at the time, because there was a fire going on and it was getting closer to us. It's pretty cool to watch, especially at night. It's really cool. But it was getting close to a lot of people's homes, and yeah, it's cool to watch, not cool to go through. Cool if you're not going through it. But let's say and bear with me if you're not a DC fan or a comic book fan or whatever, but you had this corrupt place where politicians and organized crime were kind of working together in much the same way that politicians and Wall Street are kind of working together today to create and cultivate conditions ripe for change, let's say. And what really popped into mind in this kind of like intuitive message that I got was that, right, the Joker wanted to create a better class of criminal, but exercising the empathy that I have, and especially knowing that the Joker comes from like a pretty relatable, I would say, background to someone who's not yet initiated. So in some background story of the Joker is that he's like failing at this thing that he really is holding on to, being a comedian. I think he loses his wife, it varies, but his wife is pregnant. I think she ends up getting murdered or or leaves him. And so he gets he's a very nice, good-hearted person. He just wants to like stay in his lane and do the right thing, or kind of meekly hopes for things. And then so he gets set up as a fall guy, as a patsy, falls into a vat of acid when he meets the Batman, and is scarred and changed and loses all hope that fateful day, because all his well wishes and trying to be what he thinks is a good person rather than just really be who he needs himself to be, is forced into that like role of being the chaos within a corrupt system, right? So a system is masculine energy, is yang energy. Chaos, freedom of movement, of flow without, let's say, like a direction, or without structure, is the extreme form of feminine or yin energy. So we want to be balanced individuals within who we genuinely are as people. Energy can flow within my body, yin, and my body being structured, right? Skeleton, channels of nervous system and nerves, give that direction, give that energy direction in which to flow. So that corrupt place, let's say, speaking a little bit more meta, a little more broadly, a little more macro, developed a structure in which people didn't have freedom of movement. There was too much fear. Fear is a block to love. It's the original block to love. It's the biggest block to love, right? Anger, we can say, is the next step. If you have like, if this is source and this is a block to source, this is fear, you can see that it's going to branch in two directions, right? If there's like, let's say this is just like love, free flowing, maybe like a channel like this. If it's blocked, see my two hands here, that block is going to be fear, not allowing love or life to flow into our lives. So we get kind of stuck in these old patterns of anger. Let's just say that's like the next step. Anger directed outward comes out as anger. That's an ineffective way of setting a boundary, is by saying, or getting angry and shouting, lashing out, right? That's either not liking what's coming in, or if something's good that's trying to come in, we may unknowingly, subconsciously, have developed the pattern, the filter of maybe I'm not worthy of love, I don't deserve love. When I let people in, they hurt me or they leave. And so that creates that block. And that block often leads to anger or frustration. Anger being an exacerbated form of frustration. So we have the fear, and the fear may lead to frustration and anger as a form of keeping people away so that we can avoid getting hurt, or that because we're good people, we may not want to hurt others, and so we end up hurting ourselves, right? Depression, something that I've struggled with my whole life, is, or was put to me as rage turned inward. So again, with these same beliefs of maybe I feel or have been led to believe by others, and with it doesn't blame them because they're going through their own things, having compassion. yeah, like that, just not feeling like my love is going to be accepted or that I can accept love. Um, for me, that looked like being rejected, being neglected, having moments of being abandoned or betrayed. And so it gets harder and harder and harder to let other people in, which is to say, allow a free flow of exchange of love between people. That's essentially what a relationship is: being seen, being heard for who we truly are, and being seen and being heard in our emotionality. So if we're good people, and which we are, and we just feel like that there's a block in that exchange, and we take that anger out on ourselves because we feel like we're not worthy, because we feel like there's something wrong with us, we're not enough, a slew of reasons, myriad of reasons, that rage turns inward and we take it out on ourselves. For me, that was having people who like just take out their day on me. So I'm like, okay, I must be the type of person who like that's just natural for. Later learning, no, that's not the case. They have their own issues. I don't take those on myself. And so what we want to do is find the originating incidents, practice love with ourselves and accepting ourselves for who we are, and reading the feedback that we get from other people when we express ourselves. Because we want to be ourselves, but we also want to, read the room and be respectful. Again, chaos, structure, yin yang, balance. So what this corrupt place brings about within itself, really, is this archetypical character. What is a God, not the grand total, sum of things, but an archetypical energy structure, but what needs to happen in that moment. So in this case, when things become too corrupt, that's when it gets like very good for a few people and very bad for a lot of people, is what ripens the conditions for a revolution or for a revolt. I guess one of the biggest points that I wanted to get to was how, especially in the movie, the Joker would say, like, do I look like I have a plan? And yeah, he did. He did have a lot of plans. But it was all very free-flowing, very improvisational. And that's that chaos, that divine storm that we may go through from time to time may feel like chaos. But if you can like have the patience and love for yourself, right? Asking for your space to feel what you feel, get into a safe space. If you can pull out far enough, you can see, okay, I'm going through some things. They don't feel any kind of good, but this is helping me in some way. This is happening for me in some way. This is moving me into a place of greater progress, of greater growth, and the pain that we feel, one is the sensation of letting go of something energetically. If you've never read The Body Keeps a Score, I'll give you the gist of it. Your body keeps a score, meaning anytime we go through a traumatic experience or event, our body, as well as our mind, as well as our emotions, takes a snapshot, a screenshot of that, meaning that the tension that we hold physically, be it from an old injury, where I have one right here, and where I hold a lot of tension, that injury, mental, emotional, and physical injuries are where we hold our energy, is where it freezes. Another way of like phrasing or labeling or looking at that energy is, especially physically, is called muscular shielding. I believe it's called muscular armoring. And it's where we feel like we need to develop armor in anticipation of future traumatic events. So if we went through it the first time, the mind kind of adapts to the environment, to the now, and says, okay, if this happened once, it's likely to happen again. And so we armor our bodies, mental, emotional, and physical, in such a way as to not only defend ourselves, but actually anticipate and create the conditions for it to happen again and again and again. So awareness of that is key, and allowing our bodies to come back into a state of relaxation is also key. But yeah, anyway, back to the Joker. Why these colors, green and purple, okay, violet? It's because from a spiritual or metaphysical perspective, change happens, upheaval, emotional, mental, physical upheaval happens in that macro sense from a place of love, right? We've been through, or we've been going down a road, and maybe our nervous system, maybe our subconscious, maybe our spirit, all three sense this is leading to mental, emotional, or physical stagnation, and we need to change things up and change them up now. So from a place of higher love, we have to go through this newness, what feels like chaos, but is really, in the larger scheme of things, a different kind of order or structure. So we're moving from the known into the unknown, which is always scary, which is going to send our nervous system into fight or flight, set off the mental, emotional alarms. But we see that once we get through that stuff onto the other side is when we look back and can feel the greatest sense of growth. So with that love, with that green heart chakra energy, is the love aspect of it. With the violet, the transmutational energy brings about the change. Now, if you've ever transmuted something, what happens on the spiritual plane and the non-local sort of dimension, let's say, it happens instantly. Everything is happening now. And once that idea, let's say, comes in, it comes into our dimension, our 3D-ness of linear time. And so over the course of time, this singular idea that happened in the, a flash of a moment, is now starting to play out over time. And what happens in an instant on the spiritual plane can, on the one hand, feel like, discomfort is always going to last way too long. But it can feel like a lot of stuff happening very or too quickly. So that's the green and purple energy, and why the Joker, from at least a spiritual, metaphysical standpoint, dresses in green and purple. You see Batman in like black or black and white. He sees things in black and white. Now, how this pertains to the spiritual more exclusively, especially through archetypes, is through archetypical energy. So if you've ever seen pretty much any show, Parks and Rec, The Office, Friends come to mind. We usually identify superheroes in superhero movies. We usually identify predominantly with one of the characters. Now, unknowingly, we actually take on their energy, and in so doing, have abandoned our own. So if I think of myself more as like a Chandler or a Ross or, a Jim or a Dwight, I've now left being and exploring who I am in favor of being and exploring and expressing an archetype. So if you know anything about archetypes, they're characters, and they're predominant or prevailing characters that have endured over time. So instead of being yourself, which is, I understand, can be difficult, or it can be very easy, we end up taking on the characteristics of someone else and end up perpetuating and strengthening that energy. Now, why is that important? Is because of the next part. So a different type of archetype is called an egregor. Now, an egregor is usually very predominant in religions, as one is like the devil, demons, evil spirits, entities or dark entities. And so if you've ever experienced just a time of being so enraged and not knowing why, a big part of this can feel like, on the one hand, these archetypical forces are in your vicinity, in your building, in your home, in your neighborhood, just kind of roaming around looking for energy. So if you act on or out of anger, commit something like an egregious act against yourself just as much as anyone else, and you end up hating yourself, you're creating and embodying more of this energy. And that is what gives it strength and form. Now, if you do this, that's one thing, but that's not always just the case. What ends up happening is that when you give out that vibration, it creates a ripple effect. And so it's not your fault, but it is always important to observe how we are being and be the unconditional love that we need in that moment, or that someone else even needs in that moment, without abandoning ourselves. And so when a lot of these egregors or archetypes accumulate in strength and size, is when a lot of the deeper, darker stuff happens in our world. So everybody has smaller bits of these energies, of these entities, but it's when they start to accumulate that you'll notice your thoughts take a darker route. Your then emotions take a darker route. And so you may have like these blinders put up that lead you into circumstances and experiences that are less than favorable. Right? I mean, if you think of an alcoholic, that is a breeding ground for a person's energy or spirit to not be fully in their body. Right? Call wine and liquors spirits, because they put that energy in us. And so they take some of our energy out of our bodies. If you're familiar or have heard of or are curious about this thing called the ascension process, on the one hand, it is the physical vibrating higher and higher and higher at higher frequencies. So it is like our physical world starts to ascend, but on the other hand, our spiritual energy, source energy, is descending into the physical 3D realm and plane. So that energy is coming in through our bodies and pushing out the old energies, the old programming. So the more embodied you can become energetically, spiritually, right? Not just thinking, ooh, I'm such a spiritual person, I'm consuming all this spiritual content. No. Like, the whole point is to be fully embodied, fully present, fully grounded in your body and in your experience. When we do so, it's like we become a mini sun, living our joy, living our truth, and being an example for others to follow. And so if you notice that people tend to get irritated or agitated around you, and you know you're being a loving person, or they're getting irritated and agitated around loving people, that is the light interacting with the darkness, with the old programming, and pushing it out. And so for this Joker archetype, it's kind of like, again, love and transmutation, change, energies coming together. Because we've gotten so used to, or in that case, that universe, that world, that city got so used to corruption as a norm that someone or something had to come along and destabilize and create a lot of change, create a spiritual, emotional wildfire or forest fire. Trying to think of anything else. I think that's good for now. If you do find yourself going through, your own divine storm, your own mental, emotional, physical upheaval, dark night of the soul, any kind of thing like that, it helps to get grounded. One of the meditations that I, hopefully by now, by the time you're watching this, have come up with is the meditation for certainty. So if you're going through uncertain times, right, this emotional upheaval, it's very triggering for any human person to go through uncertainty. If you're going through uncertainty, what helps to focus on is our immediate physical, somatic, bodily experience, right? If you close your eyes and you feel inside your body and around you, that's what is for certain. And if you're going through uncertainty, it can help to anchor yourself in what is certain. And so you're like spiritually magnetized in the law of attraction kind of way. You're orienting yourself back towards certainty. Yeah. So check out that meditation. And if you're really just lost in the sauce and need an objective outside perspective, and even maybe an emotional, energetic, spiritual cleaning, that's what I do. So feel free to book an appointment. I am VictorY.com/book an appointment. Yeah, if you like this video and want to see more of it, like, subscribe, and share. Yeah. Peace. Love you.